Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show where we talk about short video games, the sort of things you can pick up and complete in an evening or a weekend, games that respect your time. I'm your host, Reagan Kelly, and I am joined once again this week by Laura Nash. How are you doing, Laura?
Spectacularly.
And by my bro-host and real-life twin brother, Shane. How are you doing, Shane?
I'm in my final form.
And Nate. How are you doing, Nate?
I'm good.
That is Nate Heininger. I've given all of the others the dignity of their last names. Might as well do yours.
Very important to me, lest I be confused with a different Nate.
There are many Nates.
I'm good. You've pulled me out of my vault. I'm here to talk about some more Undertale.
Yeah, I'm really glad that I could summon both you and Shane from your Fallout 4 stupors and next to your microphones to talk some more about Undertale. If you have been following the show, you will know that our last episode was also about Undertale. There's a reason behind all of this. Last week, our episode was all about Undertale without spoilers. This is a game that spoilers are, I wouldn't say they would ruin the experience, but they would certainly lessen some of the many exciting surprises of the game. So if you didn't listen to last week's episode or haven't played Undertale, this particular episode isn't really for you. Maybe go back and listen to the last episode, which is all about this same game, completely, or at least very largely spoiler-free. Start there, and then meet us back here, where we're going to be talking about all the details of the plot and endings and all of the strange revelations of Undertale.
If this is your first time listening to the short game, I'm sorry that you picked this week.
This is going to make no sense.
Unless you're a big fan of Undertale, which, I made a joke about, not playing any Fallout. But I will say it takes a pretty awesome game to get me to, crawl out of that vault. And I am super excited to continue our conversation about Undertale. Because this is also maybe the only game we've done two entire episodes about.
Except for Life is Strange.
That's true, but
that's a multi-part game. Yeah,
exactly. And also, one of our episodes went so long that it was split into two. But this is a planned two-part episode.
So we're gonna do our best to restrain ourselves and talk about this in some way that makes some kind of sense. This game led me on a serious wiki reading binge, and we're gonna talk about all of the cool stuff towards the end. But first, we're gonna kind of just talk our way through the game a little bit, not beat by beat or moment by moment, but trying to hit some of the highlights and some of the spoilery moments that we couldn't talk about last time that we are desperate to talk about, our favorite parts of the game. I thought it might be good to start with just the fighting. What are the hardest or best fights that were the most memorable for you from the game?
I mean, I died the most with Asgore, but I had the most fun fighting Metatron because it was basically fighting David Bowie in all of his glam rock glory. I mean, the guy has a pelvis. It's not a shake. It's more like a circular wiggle.
It's on a swivel, yeah.
It's a swivel, and there's you're avoiding kicking legs, and there's sparkles. I mean, it is the dream of the 80s is alive and well in the Metatron battle. I died a lot, but I loved it.
Metatron, or excuse me, I think I keep mispronouncing it because I think it's Mettaton. Mettaton, yeah. Metatron is the angel from the Bible, if you're following along, Bible. Is that true?
Megatron?
Metatron. Megatron.
We're not very...
We're getting into some deep business here on the short game. So Mettaton. Mettaton has actually, I think, 3 fights, and every one of them is a complete, bend and destruction of the normal fighting mechanics of the game. The first one that I remember most was when Mettaton bursts into Alphys' lab and confronts you there, and he's still in his boxy robot body at that point, and his way of fighting you is with a quiz show, and rather than having your regular 4 boxes for things like fight or check or item, you have 4 quiz responses, and then little Alphys is right there trying to give you hints by doing little hand signs for A or B or C. That was so genius.
Well, Mettaton is a very popular robot, okay? So it doesn't have time to just do normal fights. Quiz show, far more entertaining.
Frankly, I would watch Mettaton's TV show.
I mean, he's a media mogul. He's got a cooking show, which somehow ends in rocket launches.
As all good cooking shows do.
And then he just becomes a pop star. I mean, he has hit every single platform. Go Mettaton.
Yeah, we're all big Mettaton fans, obviously.
Yeah, that ladder fight was particularly good. The one after the cooking show, when you have to convert your phone into a jetpack and cruise up through it, and suddenly it becomes a sort of a Gradius style, like upwards pointing, dodging shooter. That was, I mean, there's so many little moments in this game where they just throw in a mechanic or a new twist on an old mechanic that you've never seen before. And Mettaton did that in every single moment that he was on screen. He wasn't probably my favorite character because I didn't have the affection for him that I had for somebody like Toriel, for example.
Well, but that's not fair.
I know it's not. Mettaton is like, he's a cold human-killing robot machine. And
he's a rectangle. He's not like an adorable smiling face.
Like a sad bear or whatever Toriel is.
Can I just say that I really kind of want to cosplay as him if I ever do cosplay and have the balls to wear the heels myself? I think that would be a good one.
In reality, we talk about how much the mechanics get switched up during the fights and stuff. And really, it's just like what direction can you move your little heart left and right? But somehow it feels unique every single time. And I guess it's like the type of attack that they're doing, like it's teardrops or giant axes, or you're actually controlling a jetpack. Like it's still really just moving left, right, up and down and dodging things. But it's like the total package makes every one of them feel really unique.
Yeah, and the way that all of those little dodging minigames are so deeply tied to the personality of the monster that you're fighting or avoiding fighting. I mean, none of those would really make sense. The quiz show thing would make no sense at all if you were fighting one of the dogs. But with Mettaton, it's perfect. So many little intersections between the variations on the mechanic and the story that it's trying to tell and the characters that it's trying to sort of illustrate.
Yeah. You're talking about, like favorite fights. I think about Aaron, who's just like super buff. And you just have to like outflex him until he flexes away. He's really hard to dodge because he's just like coming at you with his giant biceps. Mm-hmm. And like I could never get the rhythm down on dodging those biceps, so I got hit by him all the time. I think about Jerry, who just really just wants to be, part of the pack. And if someone else flees, Jerry will flee, but he might come back.
I liked both of the Snowdrakes. The one, the teenage Snowdrake that was just wanted to be a comedian, and he told jokes, and you had to laugh at his jokes in order to make friends with him. And then his father, who you meet later, who explains, well, he ran away from home because his mother died, and he's not been handling it well. And then, I mean, we'll talk about some stuff later, but that was one that when I realized what was going on later in the game, it was a little bit heartrending. Like there's so many little funny things that also have heart and kind of make you look at them a second time.
One of my favorite, sometimes like maybe their mechanic or their joke wasn't necessarily the best, but just their names were great, like Astigmatism. Mm-hmm. It made me laugh every single time.
I thought that the fights with all of the dogs were marvelous because all of them were really behaving in a way like dogs. Like you had to pet them a certain amount of times for them to be happy, but also they would run away, they would come back, they would it was this sort of push and pull of trying to get them to calm down or rile them up or whatever. It was just very cute and dog-like, and you didn't really have to think a lot about like, okay, what do I do next? What's the puzzle? No, you just sort of treat them like a dog, and eventually they come around.
The two dogs that you have to roll around to first smell like another dog.
Dogamy and Dogessa.
Yeah, so they think that you're a puppy, and then you pet them, and they're like, oh my God, another dog that pets other dogs. This is
mind blown.
Yeah, this is a
amazing
revolution. Like, are you a new breed of dog? And that like that's how you win that fight.
That was so great.
Become a dog and pet both of them. It's so good. The dogs thing is so funny. I'm sorry. One last thing with dogs. There's that little bit of animation where it's one of the last like bigger dogs that you see. Where you're going around like little snow mounds, and then one of the snow mounds, like a little dog head pops out and a little tail, and then it like steps out of the little snow mound, and it's a giant like suit of armor.
The greater dog.
Yeah, the greater dog. It's just it's like gag animation.
I'll be honest, that was amazing.
Yeah,
it was the greatest dog.
That was my favorite sprite of all time. Like,
Yeah,
of
it's
all the
so
16-bit
funny.
sprites I have ever seen, I think perhaps my favorite is the
and he
greater
hops
dog.
out of it.
Also, after you calm down that dog and you bring him, you go back to him in Snowden and you try to talk to him, all the dog does is fart.
I didn't know that.
That's all the dog does. He goes, "Bark." And he kind of looks at you with a stupid look on his face, and the music keeps playing. All the
Amazing.
dog does is fart.
So one of my favorite fights in the game was actually one of the ones that was hardest, and there are some things about this fight that I think are a little bit of a roadblock. And I mean, I wouldn't go so far as to call the fight bullshit, but it's a bit of bullshit. And yet I still kind of loved it. And that's the fight with Moffat, the spider woman.
Yeah, that was some bullshit. I got so stuck there.
Well, it's one of the few fights in the game where you really have to wait it out.
Well, I don't know about that. I feel like there's a lot of, playing the waiting game in this game, but in this one in particular, like you're given two options. One is to give her money, and the other is to just do nothing.
Yeah, and you can bankrupt yourself doing it.
I totally did, and then like immediately there. Also, so I wound up using all of my healing items and giving her all of my money, like a loser middle schooler getting beat up for his lunch money. And then there's plenty of fights right afterwards. So
Yeah.
between her and the next save point is like a pretty nasty grind.
It's not my favorite fight mechanically. I think it's been a roadblock for a few people. I've been on the duck feed Slack this week a lot, and Gary Butterfield has been playing this game in preparation for talking about it on his show, and he's had a bit of a dimmer view of the game than I have. I think, Shane, maybe he had an experience more along the lines of yours, and this was a big roadblock for him too. I remember dying to Moffat 2 or 3 times and then looking up a wiki article about her, and even then it's not easy because you have to wait it out until finally one of her spider friends arrives and tells Moffat rather, that you haven't been killing any spiders and that you're actually kind of nice, and then she gives you a pass. But you have to survive long enough.
If you bought a spider donut or spider cider at the beginning of the game, I think that spider shows up a little earlier and is like, no, they supported the bake sale.
Oh yeah, like you basically can skip the fight, but those items are expensive.
Don't those things count like cost like $1 million gold or bottle caps or whatever?
No, not the first one at the very beginning of the game.
In the ruins,
yeah.
if you bought one for 30, I mean, I ate it right away because I've sucked at the game and needed health. But at the end of the game, that spider friend came back a little earlier and said, hey, I saw this girl at the earlier bake sale. Don't kill her.
Yeah, I don't know. I like, for me, this game was very much like, okay, what are the like actionable things? Like, what can I do, or what's different about each moment? Like, it would kind of spell itself out. So she would do like 3 attacks, and then it would say something like, what's her name again? Is looking for Moffat. I was gonna say Muffet, but I knew that wasn't right.
Maybe it is Muffet, actually. Let me double check. It is Muffet.
Is it? Okay.
I had it wrong. It's
Okay,
Muffet,
so-
like Little
yeah,
Miss Muffet, obviously.
I was right.
There we go. You were right all along.
So it's like, and that was like the game for me was like troubleshooting the fights almost. Like, okay, so what's the variable here? Okay, every 4th attack she asks for her friend. So that must be the moment. So then you pay her off so that because we didn't say when you give her money, it says like,
She won't attack you as hard for a while.
yeah, she won't attack you as hard. And that was the hardest that was the hardest moment when she'd call on her like silly, goofy spider friend and you had to like dodge it the whole time. So if you just pay right before that silly spider friend appears, then the fight's actually not too difficult, especially if you're stocked up on crab apples, which were my go-to health item.
There were a few fights like this in the game that seemed harder than sort of the surrounding material, and obviously that's partly just because they're boss fights, but I think a big part of it was just that some of the fights were trying to be so experimental that they also became kind of obscure. I didn't really understand what the process was that was going on with Muffet. Another one of these was I think it's the last fight you have with David Bowie bot.
Megatron.
Metaton.
Our Lord and Savior Megatron.
Mr. Handy.
Yes. So the final fight you have with him has this mechanic where you have to get the ratings up for the TV show, and there's different actions you can take, and all of them are part of the fight, but they also have an effect on the ratings meter, and the whole goal is to kind of get the ratings up. I had no idea about the ratings mechanic, and I thought that I was, I just thought it was moving randomly. I didn't even really understand how it was connected with what I was doing. And that fight also kicked my ass quite a bit because I didn't understand what was going on with the ratings mechanic. Things like that come out of nowhere, and sometimes you just get them and you're like, oh, that's clever, that's amazing. And then other times they come out of nowhere and you don't get them and it becomes a huge roadblock. So
had you dated Undyne yet to that point?
No, I had not.
Oh, okay, because I felt like I'd already been kind of trained, because there's and I know we're about to talk about dates, but like in the dating thing, like there's a moment where you're having like a fight with Undyne, but what you're trying to do is raise your dating power. And I did that. Like I pretty much like made it past Undyne and immediately went back. I'm sorry, not Undyne. Papyrus is the one that you
Yes.
have like yeah. I'm sorry. So
yeah, I did all the dates near the end of the game. I kind of left
I
them
had
till
dated
last.
Papyrus as soon as possible, and I felt like
Absolutely. I mean, you got to jump on that. That guy
yeah,
is
come
awesome.
on. He's the most popular. So many friends.
Such a great font.
So like that kind of did train me a little bit that like sometimes there's going to be, fights that are, I just did quotation marks in a podcast. So, so fights that are like you're trying to raise a bar, or you're trying to like, you're not necessarily trying to give mercy or trying to like kill something. You're trying to like accomplish a goal within that moment. And so
that's a really good point. I didn't even connect those two, but I think, yeah, if I had done the Papyrus date beforehand, I might have connected those dots a little better. One last fight I want to talk about before we move on to talking about all the romance of the game was the Asgore fight at the very end, which was another big roadblock for me, but also somehow one of my favorite fights in the game. Like I died like dozens of times. Like no joke, I think I died more than 20 times trying to kill Asgore. Like a lot of times.
And if you check, he says, I've already killed you 20 times.
Yeah. Fortunately, there's a save point right outside his door. So I was just like piling into that room and getting killed again and again and again and again and again. And I will say that to the game's credit, it does feel like a really, final boss. It feels really dramatic. It feels like you're employing all the things you've learned throughout the whole game about the different types of dodging mechanics and colors and things like that. And you really do have to put a lot into that fight. But apart from the Temi armor, I had the best stuff you could get, like the fancy armor that you get towards the end of the game. I forget what it's called, but the stuff that you find in the house. I had the nice stuff. And yet I was still getting my ass kicked again and again and again. And it was at that point, after dying probably 20 times, I think it did say, and I'm pretty sure it was 20 or 23 times, I did a bunch of Googling, found out about the Temi armor, backtracked and got it, went back and, curb stomped him in one go. But without that, like, it was just punishing hard. I'm glad the game kind of included that Temi armor as a kind of a release valve for people who got frustrated and just wanted to get past Asgore. But I won't deny that the game has these spikes in difficulty, like Muffet and like Asgore, that can come kind of out of nowhere.
I died 14 times and then beat him without Temi armor.
Wow, good for you.
But I felt very accomplished. But I also died 14 times in a row.
That is a lot of times. Like, he's lethal.
So I had Temi armor because I followed Reagan's advice on this. I had Temi armor. I beat him on the I beat him on the second try, but I feel like it's skewed because you guys went and fought him, and then when got Temi armor, I went into it with Temi armor. And once, like, they do a really cool thing where it's, blue attacks if you're not moving, orange attacks if you are moving. I liked that, like, having to, like, rapid fire do it. Like, move, don't move, don't move, don't move, move,
Mm-hmm.
But, like, you could also just, like, even if you got hit in that, as long as you were dodging the other stuff, like, it was fine.
But I suspect most of us are lovers and not fighters.
Oh, my.
Ooh.
I know. Worst segue ever.
No,
Best.
So,
Best segue.
you guys know me and games that involve romance. Like, nothing will make Reagan's little heart pitter pat like a video game with dates in it.
Dun, 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 dun.
Well, Freedom Planet didn't have dates in it, so I mean, it was
I don't know. It had that interminable TV watching scene. I would guess you could count that as a date.
Oh my god, you're right.
the whole thing was like a dating simulator without any actual dating. So.
Well, the dating was in my head, but the
gross.
dates in
They're
this
like kids.
No, they're not. They're dragons and cats.
they're definitely children, dragons, and cats. Though.
We're not talking about me. We're talking
Do
about the
not
dates
cut
in
this.
Undertale.
The
We're
people
talking about
need to
dating
know.
monsters, guys.
People need
Exactly.
to know.
So this is something that I was really, really pleased to see the game include. And you get to date 3 characters, Papyrus, Undyne, and Alphys. And what was really interesting to me about this was, like, I didn't know about the dates. I didn't know that was a thing until I had gotten all the way through and beaten Asgore and gotten the neutral ending. So when I completed the game at that point, you've beaten the game. And we'll talk about what the neutral ending kind of entails, but after the sort of final, curtain of the neutral ending, Flowey shows up and tells you essentially to reset the game, and will give you, if you haven't gone on all the dates, and in which case I hadn't gone on any, Flowey shows up and will tell you to go on a date, basically. He says, hey, maybe you should, it seemed like you were good friends with Papyrus, maybe you should go talk to him, or something like that. When I did, oh my gosh, the Papyrus date, guys, was so great.
It's
Yeah.
really funny.
You gotta love that spaghetti.
Papyrus is such an over-the-top character who all he wants is to have friends and be loved and be famous and just be like, everyone knows who Papyrus is. And you go on the date and Papyrus is like over the moon that someone wants to date him and be friends and like this is everything coming together. And so we can kind of discuss how you guys played it, but you have various like dialogue choices as you're going through it to kind of guide the date along. And I went full blown like, we're dating Papyrus.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any other
okay.
choice?
I assume most people did. And it's what's so funny about it is they flip it on its head where like you go through this whole thing just like professing your love or professing your like friendship with Papyrus. You do the fight that's kind of like the Metaton where you're performing actions at Papyrus trying to raise like the date power, and he finally like goes over the top and he's like, listen, we need to talk. Clearly you like me way more than I like you. I tried to make it work. We just can't be together. And it all comes crashing. And I was like, but can we still be friends?
I love how all of these dates end in like, oh, well, somebody lets somebody else down easy and everybody parts as friends, even though...
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say that the Undine date ends. I mean, yes, you get let down easy. You also leave her house a smoky, fiery ruin.
Only fire lives here now.
Only fire lives here now. Yes, it's a cooking date, and there's lots of spear throwing. She breaks her kitchen table in half. You like have a metal cooking date where you are the most badass punk person trying to cook spaghetti, and you burn the house down, and it's so satisfying.
That was so fun too. And I loved how it kind of, both of these turn the date in, you use the fighting mechanics for the date, but both in kind of different ways. And I remember in the Undyne date, there's this one moment that I just think is amazing where she's asking you what you want to drink, and there's options out on the counter like tea and soda and like salt, and it gives you Undyne's little spear, and you like have to point it at the thing that you want, and just something about the way that interface worked was just so funny and cute.
Especially that one of the drinks is labeled clearly the right choice.
Yeah, that's the tea, right? And I mean, ominously, it's the yellow flower tea that Asgore likes. Ooh. So all of the dates were super great, but Alphys' date, and I'm pronouncing it the same way that you guys were, right? I don't know. That's how I was pronouncing it in my head.
That was a
We
name
talked
that
about that last time.
Yeah, that was a name that was just like, I know that string of letters.
Yeah.
It's like Hermione in Harry Potter.
Yeah. Hermione, like I pronounced it for the first 2 books in my head.
Mine was Hermoine.
Yep. Alphys' date is my favorite bar none, because at the end of the Undyne date, you get the letter from Undyne to Alphys where she's confessing her love, but she doesn't sign it, and when you deliver it to Alphys, she's assuming it's from you. Which, by the way, that moment in retrospect where she's behind the door of her lab and you slide the letter under the door and she's in there saying, I don't want to read it. I can't read it. They've sent so many. No, I'm going to. I have to read it. Like, it's so sad when you think about, no, she's been receiving all this mail from the parents.
Oh, I didn't put that together because in my timeline, it's a little bit off because I completed 2 dates because you can't go on the Alfie's date if you're doing a pacifist run until the second time you play.
Right.
So I actually had slid under the door, and yeah, she had some muttering that I thought was like, oh, it must be bill collectors or something. I forgot that moment even existed.
Yeah, and when
so
you go into her
sad.
room, there's all these piles of letters, and it's like she's not answering them, and there's a good reason, and we'll talk about that, I guess, in more detail when we talk about the True Lab. So the Alfie's date, of course, date-wise, is super cute because she goes with you to the junkyard, which is where she feels most at home, poor thing. And then you encounter Undyne, and you discover Alfie's huge crush on Undyne, and of course you kind of already know that it's mutual. And so you have that moment where you have to do a romantic role play between Alfie's and the main character, playing out the scene where one of you is pretending to be Undyne. That was the cutest thing.
I just love all the different mechanics of the different dates. No one is very much like the other.
Yeah.
It's just good insight into the characters. It's so silly because, this game plays on every single RPG, trope. And what would a modern RPG be without the ability to date many of the different characters?
I mean, I really loved that you never were going to end up with any of these people. It became clear from the beginning of all the dates that, you were more invested than
Well,
they
you're
were.
a child. Like,
Yeah.
Of course you're not going to marry the skeleton guy or the fish woman. But, it's so wonderful to see those relationships between them all grow. Like, you could go through this game, and if you don't touch on this stuff, you could just think, okay, I mean, that's what the genocide run is, essentially, is, okay, skeleton boss, fish lady boss, scientist boss. Like, you could not see the life that these characters have in this world where, Papyrus admires Undyne, and she wants the best for him, and even though she knows he'll never be a great guard person, she wants to teach him to cook so he'll have something to do with his life, and how Undyne respects Alphys for her, science and her stick-to-itiveness, and Alphys loves Undyne for her, toughness, and all these little layers that you don't pick up unless you get into these people's lives, and that's really what the dates are all about.
Yeah, pretty awesome. Let's go ahead and move into the ending of the game. But before we get into the individual endings, we've been saying these words over and over and over: genocide, pacifist, and neutral. I think it would be best to kind of discuss what we've learned about the universe and how it's portrayed, because I think they do it very, very well.
Yeah, it's actually, there's so much more going on story-wise than I expected. Like, when going into this game, I kind of expected it to be on a level with something like Earthbound, or maybe even lighter than that in terms of like lore. There's not a lot to Earthbound lore. If you really want to nerd out about it, there's some stuff, but there's a story, and there's backstory, and there's a whole wiki full of stuff.
And like unreliable narrators and like
Oh,
all
yeah.
sorts of it's definitely layered, and it just speaks to the intelligence of the design of the game on every level, from the music to the gameplay to the storytelling. Like, you could just play through this game and be like, that was silly.
Yeah.
Or like us, we could like obsess over it and, like Reagan, read the what I imagine is an infinite wiki. I think that you could just go
And don't even
forever.
get me started on the tumblers stuff.
Oh God. Dear God.
There's a lot that you learn as you go through the game, and a lot of it is delivered in these really tiny fragments. So, there's different places where you'll walk through hallways and encounter animals or monsters that will tell you little bits of the story, and there's signs and logs and things that you can read in various different places. And to sum it up, at least what we'd have learned through the neutral ending, the underground is sealed by the barrier. We know that from the very beginning. But Asgore, the king of the underground, the big bad of the game, or so it seems at the beginning.
Big Dad.
Yeah,
Nice.
he's
The daddening continues.
indeed, and Asgore is trying to break the barrier, which will require 7 human souls. And monsters can't pass through the barrier, but humans can because they have a soul. And monsters have souls too, but they're different. And it doesn't go into a lot of detail until we get through to some more depth. But we know that monster souls can't cross the barrier and human souls can. And we know that we're not the first human to fall into the underground. When you fall down there, and you encounter Toriel at the very beginning of the game, she says, I've lost count of the number of humans that have come through. And all of them went, and they were all killed. And
Which we know the number.
we do.
6.
It was 6. And they only need 7. We're it. We're the last one.
Yeah, and what's really funny too, I love what they did with Asgore, because Asgore is like really treated as like the bad guy, but every single person that talks about Asgore loves Asgore.
Yeah.
Asgore, like, you've got Metaton as like the pop culture icon. Asgore is like Laura said, he's like the dad. Like everybody's what's one of his real name? It's like Mr. Fluffy Pants or something like that. I can't remember the.
Yeah, you can actually, after the pacifist run, find out the origin of that nickname, Fluffykins.
So what we know is that Asgore, despite everyone saying that he's a great guy, he wants to, after collecting 7 human souls, go across the barrier, destroy all of humanity, destroy the barrier, so that the monsters can then come in and populate.
Yeah, he wants to
Earth.
start the war again, basically. Like there was a war, they got trapped down there. He wants to break out and get revenge. And who wouldn't? But if you've been, meeting all of these monsters and presumably being a nice guy through most of it, and you get all the way to the end, just before we encounter Asgore, Sans, our buddy from the very beginning of the game. Sans is such a great character.
Blah, 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 blah.
He comes out and kind of weighs your sins. He's kind of the what's the name of that Egyptian god who puts your heart on a thing? He kind of
Osiris?
measures you up before. Thank you. See, Laura, you got the good education.
Didn't you guys go like to the same school for the majority of?
No.
No,
Okay.
no, she went to a real college.
Okay.
And we also went to different high schools.
Yes,
Oh,
we
okay.
did. We went to middle school together.
Also, she went to Professor Xavier's Academy.
I mean, I am a mutant, so.
I only just recently learned that I don't know any of your real names, so.
So we meet up with Sans for the final time, and he kind of gives you an assessment of your morality through the game, and it's pretty cute. Something that's very interesting at the end is that he tells you that you have 0 XP, that is execution points, and that you have a level an LV of 1, that is your level of violence. Which I think turns that moment on its head. Like, if you'd been playing the game like a real RPG, at the end of an RPG, what have you gained? You've gained a high level of violence, and you've gained many execution points. And I love that shame of that. That's and the fact that in my playthrough, Sans decided, I guess you're okay. Good luck in there with Asgore. Try not to kill him. I loved that scene, even though it was really brief, because it kind of lets you reflect on, hey, look, you managed to get through this game without hurting anything.
They also make it a joke out of it, because they make a joke out of everything, but it's like a hooded figure that like explains everything, and then out of the silence just comes that stupid Sans noise. And then you're like, oh my god, it's him again. So I played the neutral. I mean, I know technically like your first run through is pretty much always going to be the neutral run anyway. Mm-hmm. But I had a experience in which the only thing that I killed was the only thing that truly loves you, which was Toriel. That is the one thing I killed on my first run.
What did Sans say to you about it?
It was very, I mean, It was neutral. He was just like, hey, here's where you are. How do you feel about the choices you've made? And then that's it. And you go through and you meet Asgore. And this is the same on all playthroughs, but you meet Asgore, who is really reluctant, at least on the neutral run, really doesn't want to start this fight. In fact, he gives you many opportunities to be like, no, let's not fight, which I know is partly like a gameplay mechanic because like it's the standard RPG thing. Like once you've made this decision, you've gone past everything and now it's the end of the game. But it also feels a little real where he's like, you don't want to fight me right now. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? Yeah, I don't want to fight you right now. And when you finally do, we've already talked about the fight, but he's very reluctant the entire time, even in the neutral run. And you get to a pretty cool little ending where like you have to fight him. There's I think like the only actions are like talk, and the only response is there's not much to say or something to that degree.
Yeah.
And so you realize that like there's no gimmick here, there's no mechanic because they do the thing where it's like blue, you can't be hit if you're not moving orange. So I thought I tried a million different things to be like, well, if I dodge these perfectly, maybe he'll like I honor your...
Maybe he'll love me.
Yeah, like, you know, I
Daddy.
thought that for a long time, like, what do I have to do to, like, make him stop fighting me? So I would do all these different things that, like, okay, I have to go a full wave of attacks without getting hit. And then he'll, like, believe that I'm real or something. And then, but really, you just have to fight him. And so you bring him down, and he eventually gets, like, you take his health down, he gets down on one knee, and you have two choices. You either fight, which represents, you know, kill him, or mercy, which obviously represents not kill him. But the kind of crux is, like, if you kill him, you are saying that you're going to kill him and go through the barrier, and you'll go home. You'll be out of the underworld, or whatever it is, and you're good. Or if you don't kill him, you will essentially stay there and live with him. And I chose to, give him mercy the entire time. And you have to say mercy like 6 times.
Yeah.
He keeps saying, like, why are you doing this? He actually gets to the point where he kind of asks you to kill him because he, and I'm going to paraphrase it really quickly, but basically he tells a really heartbreaking story about a human that fell down. He tried to bring it back to the human world. The humans all attacked him, and he had to flee back to the underworld, and he's been trying to, like, relive that moment. Loving and caring for a human.
Well, his son did.
It was his son. That's
Yeah.
right.
His son.
Yeah.
His son carried his best. The kid fell down, befriended his son. The son went through the barrier with the kid because the kid got really sick and wanted to go back to his village one last time to see the golden flowers. Then everyone is like, "Oh no, this guy's a monster!" and attacks him.
And this is the sort of the first we hear about that, but it's a big deal, and it's fleshed out in the true ending. So we'll kind of talk about it more then. But we hear all about the first human child.
Yeah. And the son dies carrying him back through the barrier.
Yeah, and it was sort of this this loss that drove Asriel to start killing all the humans that fell down there in the hopes of trying to break down the barrier. And if you mercy Asriel or if you kill him, either way. Maybe you've just given him mercy, and he's saying, "Oh, this will be great. You can stay. We'll stop fighting. We can be like a family." And then suddenly, out of nowhere, a bunch of bullets circle Asgore and destroy him, and
his soul
fades
and
away. They destroy his soul.
Ouch.
And then out pops Flowey, and he says, "You idiot! Didn't I tell you in this world it's kill or be killed?" And then the game freaking crashes.
Yeah, and it's so silly. Like, I actually got tricked. The game crashed, and I was like, what? Well, all right. And I actually put it down for a minute. Like, I stopped playing. I was like, well, because the Asgore fight, while I did do it on, like, my second try, it's kind of a long fight.
Yeah.
And
so I
there's
was
no
like,
save after.
Yeah, and so I was like, damn it. So I got super tricked. Closed my laptop. I was like, well, I guess I'll deal with that later. Because again, at this point, I had not really taken advantage of like the closing and like opening up save states and all that. Like I hadn't really thought about that. So I really thought it crashed. And then I think I was saying something in our Slack channel, and you guys were like, yeah, that was
It
That was
just does
part.
that.
It
I
just-
think that's so genius. Like it's another little way, like the way that it talks about and handles the save mechanic, that it blurs the line between the game and and you as the player. And this is sort of Flowey saying like, you think you're in control here, I'm in control here, and Flowey rage quits the game. Like
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, and sidebar real quick, if you ever want to delete the game entirely to like do an entirely fresh run, because again, the game remembers everything that you've done, even if you're starting over. It's super tricky. Like there are save files like deep into the computer so that it can remember that stuff. And I'm sure that it's not super technical, but it felt like I've never seen another game that remembers stuff like that. And I love that kind of innovation on like a crazy little RPG Maker game. Because Molly wanted to play it, so I had to delete the whole game entirely. And I kept, it's like Steam, like delete local files, and then I'd open the game back up, and it'd be like,
Nope, there he
yeah,
is.
yeah, it'd be like, what are you doing? And so it took me a while to delete the game, but I actually opened it back up, a couple hours later to play it again, and you then have to fight Flowey.
Oh yeah, and when you
Fight
first open it,
Flowey.
it shows the normal like I was initially like, oh crap, the game crashed. Damn it, Flowey, what'd you do? And then I reopened it, and you see what a part of the beginning sequence, and then it glitches out, and then you see the initial like load game or continue screen, and your save game has been renamed to Flowey, and he's at level 9999. And when you continue, you load instantly into a battle with Flowey.
And I don't even know how to explain this. People should just go if you're listening to this and you haven't played.
I mean,
it.
heck, you've played this, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
You're one of the people that's played this. So
You
we
had
can
to
just
play
talk
this
about
one.
this battle. Like, this is the coolest looking battle. Like, this is such... I know this won't really be a reference for you guys, but it really is it's a clear homage to... A lot of the stuff about this game is a clear homage to the last boss in Earthbound, which is deliberately creepy and kind of like plays on these, it's just very, very creepy for pixel art, as creepy as pixel art can get. And that's really what this boss does. Flowey is now completely in control of your game. He's erased your save game, or so he says, and now he has full control. He has all the human souls, and he's going to use them to destroy you utterly. And the boss fight is, I mean, it's kind of not losable, which I think is a really interesting choice. Like, we've essentially fought the last boss that you have to actually like beat. Essentially everything we do from this point on in the game on, and it's not a short amount of stuff, is like almost on autoplay.
Yeah, kind of. The boss was I actually, so here's where we're different. I had a harder time getting through the Flowey fight than I had on like any other fight in the game. I died to Flowey like 15 times.
What, really? I didn't even know you could die here.
Oh, absolutely. You can.
For sure
each
you
one of
can
his hits
die.
is like 5.
Oh, I did it on
Yeah.
my
Hit
first
points.
try. I thought it was impossible to die.
Oh, that's
Sorry.
funny.
No,
So
no.
yeah. So there you go.
You
yeah,
definitely
so-
can die.
Yeah, and it crashes the game every time you die. And then you have
Mm-hmm.
to start it over, and it's like little text. It's like, ha, 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 what do you think you're doing? Like, I get to watch you die forever. And you start the game, and then you get killed
Like,
by
how
him.
many times you going to do this?
Yeah, now, for what it's
You
worth,
can't get your game back.
once you get past the early portion of the fight, it, like you're saying, it does kind of become, because essentially you call in the help of these 6 other souls of the humans that had died before, and they provide you with copious healing benefits. And once I got to that part, I never died again, because like you said, you can just kind of like balance your life gain with how much you're losing. But yeah, like his little like airplane bombs, his little flamethrowers, his little vines, like they did a lot of damage, and I just was not very good at dodging them. So I died several times.
Well, the battle is visually really interesting. It's got this cool Photoshoppy look, and it's just throwing everything at you as fast as possible. But eventually you do beat Flowey, and you get your ability to save back. That's one of the most interesting things about this, and we hadn't really talked about it too much, and probably don't need to too much. But like, the ability to save is a big theme in this game, as is the idea of determination. So, because you have determination, you can save your game. And when you save your game or load your game, that's something that the character is doing in the context of the world. That's a power that your character has, which I think is a really interesting way of kind of looking at that mechanic.
Yeah, I mean, very few games that I can think of acknowledge the player to that level. Like, you saved your game, and we know you saved your game, and that is silly. Like in RPG, it's all those RPGs where you just like ram your face into stuff until you figure out how to beat it, and then you beat it, but it never acknowledges it. And this game hits everything.
Yeah, and once you actually manage to defeat this awesome 3D collage Photoshop version of Flowey, then you can choose to kill or show mercy. And again, you have to, I showed mercy, and as such, I got a hint to how to complete the next ending. Mm-hmm. I had played completely passive. I hadn't killed a single thing except Asgore, which I had to. And so I got a little call from Flowey being like, hey, you might want to, go check out, go visit Undane. And then I got the letter to go to the lab.
I really liked that it makes it, if you are playing pacifist, it does make sure that you see both endings, because it's basically impossible to not get the neutral ending the first time through, and then it hints at you, hey, go back and do this again.
It's a lot of work, so it's like,
yeah,
just make sure you didn't miss that second ending.
Yeah, and the second ending is where we get a lot of sort of deep revelations about the plot. But what I will give the game credit for is that the neutral ending is a satisfying ending. It's not a perfect ending. You're leaving the underground and leaving all of your friends behind, and you get that sequence with the phone calls from them where they're, telling you what's happening afterwards. And what's kind of neat there is that there's variations of it based on like who you killed or didn't kill. But you're leaving the underground, you're leaving all of your friends behind. They're still trapped there. Which isn't as satisfying as you'd like it to be. So if you load back and try to do the full ending, you have to go through the lab, where we learn some really dark and interesting stuff. And then we get the opportunity to face Flowey a second time.
So after you finish all of your dates and you go back to the lab, you find out that Alfie's has a secret, and you go in what looks like a Japanese restroom.
I didn't make that connection, but yeah, you're right.
I mean, that's what it looks like. It has the little, what looks like a little symbol, and you hit it, and it actually ends up being an elevator to what they call the true lab. And it's this dusty, creepy-looking underground with another broken elevator. And there are screens with sci-fi-like journal entries giving you little hints at what Alfie's been up to. And it turns out Alfie's been studying souls for Asgore. That's what the royal appointment was. Because, again, there's that soul power needed. So he's trying to figure out a way to harvest or have a vessel for how to use monster souls, possibly, and strengthen them so they can get through the barrier.
And this is the first time that you get the... it kind of reveals that the game has been constantly using the word determination throughout the game, and every time you save,
most commonly in the save points.
Yeah.
Every save is determination. Yeah.
Except for in the Temi village, then it's a determination.
But determination is more than just an abstract concept or theme here. In the world of the game, determination is the thing that makes human souls different from monster souls. It's a power that allows a soul it gives a soul the will to live, to persist after death. And they say that is why when a monster dies, their soul ceases to exist and they turn to dust. Whereas humans, when they die, their soul persists. And that's, that they're trying to get through the barrier by strengthening monster souls in order to make them more like human souls.
Yeah, and what you see kind of the results of the experimentation. You get these creepy, I grab dead bodies, I put determination into them. Oh, wait, now they're all alive. Oh, wait, oops. Oh, I better turn to the families. All of this, awkwardness.
I felt so bad for Alfie's here because you've already got such affection for her, and then you find out she's doing this totally creepy Mengele shit,
Yeah, and it results, you keep fighting these grotesque ghosts that are mashups of 5 or 6 of the characters you fought earlier.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier,
amalgamates.
the two snow drakes who are so sad about the snow drake's mom had died. Well, you meet a refrigerator in this that, well, it looks a lot like a snow drake, except it's got it's got mouths in place of eyes, and it's all screwed up. And what's really sad is that presumably its husband, the adult snowdrake, was a comedian. Well, you tell it jokes and it starts remembering more about its life, and it starts to come back, and that's how you make friends with it. Like, it really kind of sad and creepy too. Like, it's hard to make scary pixel art, but I found the whole True Lab sequence really unsettling and kind of scary.
Yeah, and you even find one area that's a videotape library where she says, "Hey, I was digging around the castle and found these tapes." And it's very jarring because you've just been creeped up by all these ghosts, and then you put this tape in and you keep hearing people referring to you by name, the name you put in, which is creepier if you put your own name in, by the way.
Yeah,
Romango would not have been creeped out with people being like, "Hey, Laura, why don't you smile?" I was like, "Oh, please
And that's
don't."
why I hide behind the mask of Romango. And you know what? Romango is living strong in the wasteland right now, working on my settlements, killing some feral ghouls.
We got to get a picture of new Romango of the wastes.
It pretty much looks like all the Romangos.
The logs that you pick up in the True Lab are all mostly by Alfie's about her work, but those videotapes are kind of more deep. Like, they are, it seems, home videos, all with the lens cap on, so we didn't have to illustrate anything, of Asgore and Toriel at home, and also of Asgore and Toriel's son, who we found out earlier had died, and his friend, the human, who goes by the same name as you, player character, which is very confusing at that point.
Again, especially if it's your name.
Oh, yeah, Laura.
I have to jump in. For this game, you need to remember it was not Romango because it would not fit. It was Romang.
Oh, man.
Totally different character.
Yeah, so in this version, we've already revealed this connection between you and Azrael, the son. And once you complete the game and go back to have your boss fight, it's interrupted by all your friends, which is all lovely until Flowey shows up again.
That scene was adorable. All of them show up and they say, "Hello,
Flowey.
we're all gonna be here together as friends and stop fighting, and no one's gonna kill Asgore, which nobody wanted to do anyway, and we're all gonna be buds." And then freaking Flowey shows up again, and at that point, I literally screamed. I was like, "I thought I killed you!"
You did not kill him.
No, I had given him mercy, but I really, like, of course he was coming back, but it did blindside me a little bit because it seems like such a ending. It seems like everything's fine, I thought maybe we were gonna find Flowey and hug it out or something, but nope, there he is, and we get another boss fight with him. This time, when he reveals his true form as Azrael Dreamer, the son of Toriel and Asgore.
And it turns out that, player name, aka Laura, was actually the first human that fell down. And Laura and Azrael had this plan that they were going to go through the barrier, kidnap a bunch of humans, and kind of maybe restart the war?
There's the plan involved, apparently. Now, this is something that's delivered in dribs and drabs, so it's something you kind of have to piece together. But as best that I can understand it, Azrael and, player character name were conspiring together to break down the barrier. Not in an evil way, really, although there is some indication that player character name, the first human, might have truly been evil. But their plan was for the player character name character, I'm just going to call them first human, for the first human to die by poison and by eating some buttercups, the gold flowers. And then they carry first human's Azrael carries first human's body to the town where they're from, and they are attacked by the humans, and they don't end up killing the humans or getting any souls after all. And the implication, or if you, there's some places in the game where it's really spelled out all the details, but they're hard to find. Apparently, by the way, if you beat the true ending, and then before completing the game and sort of finishing, you backtrack all the way to the very, very beginning of the game, you get an additional conversation with Asriel in his sort of cute goat boy form that really spells out some more details. So if you haven't seen that, I know I didn't. I only backtracked about halfway just to kind of talk to the characters I wanted to. But if you do, he reveals that really, in that moment, when the player character named First Human died, their souls merged together. And so it was really the first human in Asriel's body carrying the first human's body back to the town, and with evil intent. The intent being to kill humans, take souls, and get revenge on all of humanity somehow by releasing the monsters. And it was Asriel who fought back against that. And in doing so, they went back and died together on the patch of flowers, leaving Asriel's dust on the flowers. And the dust is sort of the essence of the monster. It's what they turn into when they die. Later on, Alphys uses that flower as the vessel for determination.
Yeah, the medical experimentations.
Yes.
Let's not mince words. Basically, she is the lovable mad scientist who caused everything to go horribly wrong.
Yeah. So Flowey is the result
Everything.
of giving an object without a soul the determination to have the will to live. And because Flowey has no soul, but has the essence of Asriel, he's turned evil by this. He becomes this evil creature with this creepy, dark power and this drive to take over the world. And because he has so much determination, he had the ability to save, which is why he has the ability to go back in time or to mess with your save games. But when you enter the scene, you have more determination than him, which takes away his ability to save. So it explains why he's so resentful towards you. It's the character with the most determination that has control over saving and loading of the quote-unquote game or resetting the world.
Yeah, and it's to the game's credit that it doesn't sound like an exposition dump. They really do parcel it out very nicely.
Yeah, so what I just loaded on you is the result of, first of all, me playing through the game obsessively, watching it on YouTube multiple times, and then reading a bunch of wiki stuff to try to put that into a narrative order. Playing through it, it had that feeling that a lot of RPGs have, where you feel like you've just gotten a really satisfying ending where all of the characters are where you want them to be, but there are still questions that are left only partially answered, and that if you really want to, you can tease out those answers by sorting it out for yourself or, reading stuff. All this information is in the game. It's at the very least heavily hinted at. But really, what we're left with at the end of the game is just a really nice ending. Everybody gets out of the underground, and you go to live with Goat Mom in a house with a nice view.
Yeah, you get to wander back through, and everyone's happy now, and the bartender who wouldn't talk to you just says, da-da-da, 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 good job.
Yeah.
And it's great. Everyone's happy. Everyone is so happy, in fact, that if you completely complete the game and you try to play it again, Flowey's like, oh, God, please don't do that. Everyone's
my
happy.
God.
Why would you bother resetting? Why would you destroy their lives?
This is something that is really genius and heartbreaking. I want to play this game again. But you know what? I probably never will. And it's because every time I open the game, it says, everything's so nice now. Why would you don't do this to us? Don't reset the game. And I've opened it 2 or 3 times since then, and I can't make myself do it. I cannot reset the game when everything turned out so well, and the game literally asks me not to.
We have looked up, or some of us have looked up what happens to genocide ending. I think we're going to leave that to, I don't know why you would want to play one.
The genocide ending is fascinating.
Look it up online if you're curious.
I could never bring myself to do it. We'll have a link in the show notes to a video that I watched that kind of did it for me. I don't feel like I need to play it now that I watched this video. It's a nice full-length, almost hour-long video that shows you all of the key differences between the true ending, or excuse me, between any of the true or neutral endings and the genocide ending. And I will say that it's worth watching just for the final boss fight alone, which has music and mechanics and all sorts of stuff that you just don't see in the main game. And the final boss fight is stellar. It's stunning. So it's worth watching. I feel my game experience is complete without doing it myself, but I'm glad I watched it.
So we received a really awesome email from the same listener who actually, basically said that we should play this game. We talked about him in the last episode, Cowway. He wrote...
Thanks again, buddy.
Yeah, like an essay. Like this was fantastic reading, and I do want to read a little bit of it for our listeners, and it's some really good insight. And I have trimmed a couple parts, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because again, it was awesome, and thank you again for writing it. So the game does a lot of neat things that subvert some experienced gaming impulses. It seems to have a different way of incentivizing the player. Doing things like the normal RPG way where you kill everything you come across makes it so you gain levels of violence and thus have more HP, but it also deprives you of some aspects of the world. I haven't done this myself since I don't have the heart, but if you go around killing things, you lose the ability to interact fully with the world since denizens of the world are killed in battle. If you go around killing absolutely everything, you don't get puzzles, you don't get to talk to NPCs, everybody runs away from you, and you're just left with this tedious exercise of depopulating the world in a way that frankly seems very boring. Thus, taking the normal RPG gamer route deprives you of a lot that makes this world very special, which is its humor, its characterization, and the attention to detail in the world. He would go on, Kyle goes on to write about a article from Giant Bomb, which we will put in the show notes if anyone wants to read it, but it's actually a lot about what we were just kind of discussing. Kyle writes, I think Austin Walker of Giant Bomb had a very good piece on the game and how it runs counter to the modern culture of achievement hunting and creating a piece of work where players can walk away satisfied enough that they don't feel the need to wring every single piece of content from it. The genocide path holds little interest for me because it involves a style of gameplay and outcomes that I'm not interested in pursuing. I played the game and reached a resolution that completely satisfies me, and I'm happy to walk away from it with all of the positive memories I had from my experience, and I'm not asking any more from it. I'd never had that kind of feeling from a game before.
Something really amazing about the genocide ending is that it's not necessary. But it's really all there. It's there as a totally valid pathway to play the game. But it's also, as Sans will tell you, going to give you a bad time. The game as a whole is made better by the fact that this genocide ending exists, even if most players don't and shouldn't play it. Like, it's the fact that it exists and that you know it exists makes the choices that you make more meaningful as you make them through the game. Like, it really is important that it be there, even if I will never play it.
Yeah, I would love to see a Life is Strange esque stat line at the end, like how many people killed Washua, and how many people killed Toriel, and like how many people did a genocide run. I would love to see the breakdown of that.
Yeah. Such a great game. Thank you guys so much for talking about it with me, at such length. And thanks again to Cowway for writing in about it again. So our next game that we're going to be covering on the show is a real quickie that we won't be spending quite nearly as much time as we have on the last couple of things we've covered. We're going to be talking about... Laura, what's the title again? I can't ever say it. I've just been calling it the bomb game.
Keep talking and nobody explodes.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. So Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes is our next game. This is a game that you have to play with a buddy. So if you have one of those, you should give it a try, and we'll be talking about it on our next episode. This is a game that Laura played at one of the... what was the event that you went to again, Laura?
It was at Bit Bash, and it is a great way to test what your perceived strength of your relationships.
I feel like we should quantify or qualify that we're hoping to do this game for our next episode, because
if we all die in the explosion that results, then we won't be bringing this to you next week. Yeah. But hopefully we will be back next week with another episode of The Short Game. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. If you want to follow along with this or leave us any feedback, you can head to our website, www.theshortgame.net, where you'll find a feedback form and you can write to us as Cowway. Or you can follow all of us on the Twitter, which is where we spend a lot of our time, too much probably. I've been your host, Reagan Kelly, and you can find me on Twitter at ReaganK, RayGank. Laura, where can people find you?
You can also find me on Twitter at Laura J. Nash.
And Nate, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter as well as deep in my vault, but on Twitter at NateSTL.
And Shane, who's been so quiet this episode, where can people find you?
Oh, well, I'm over at 8-Bit Shane.
And thank you so much once again for joining us on this episode of The Short Game.